The dusty trail to Redemption Creek had seen its share of violence, but nothing like what happened on that scorching afternoon in 1881, when three ruthless bandits cornered a young Apache boy on the open range. They expected easy prey. What they didn't expect was ranch hand Sam Fletcher, a man haunted by his own past, who would risk everything to defend a child he'd never met. Sam's split-second decision to stand against overwhelming odds would bring an unexpected visitor to his door, one whose arrival would challenge everything he thought he knew about honor, justice, and the true meaning of courage. Chapter 1. The Moment of Choice. The merciless Arizona sun beat down on the parched earth of Redemption Creek as Sam Fletcher guided his horse along the dusty cattle trail that September afternoon in 1881. At 32, Sam had spent the better part of a decade trying to forget the blood and chaos of his military service during the Apache Wars, seeking redemption through the honest work of ranching in this unforgiving territory. The isolation suited him. Fewer questions about his past, fewer reminders of the choices that haunted his sleep. Sam was checking fence lines for the Double Bar Ranch when a sound of raised voices carried across the desert wind. His weathered hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip as he urged his mount toward a cluster of red rocks that provided natural cover. What he witnessed from behind those boulders would test every principle he'd tried to rebuild his life upon. Three men on horseback had cornered a young Apache boy against a steep canyon wall. The child couldn't have been more than 12 years old, his small frame dwarfed by the towering rock face behind him. Even from a distance, Sam could see the terror in the boy's posture as he pressed himself against the stone, searching desperately for an escape route that didn't exist. The leader of the bandits was a massive man with a scarred face and clothes that marked him as one of the numerous outlaws who plagued the territory's remote regions. His companions flanked the boy on either side, their weapons drawn and ready. These weren't soldiers following orders or lawmen pursuing justice. They were predators who had found easy prey far from any witnesses or protection. Sam's military training allowed him to assess the tactical situation with cold precision. Three armed men against one unarmed child represented the kind of overwhelming odds that left little room for heroic intervention. The smart choice would be to ride away, report the incident to the territorial authorities, and let others handle the consequences. Sam had learned during his army service that trying to save everyone often resulted in saving no one. Yet as he watched the smallest bandit dismount and approach the terrified child with obvious malicious intent, something fundamental shifted in Sam's chest. The boy's desperate attempts to communicate in broken English, his small hands raised in a universal gesture of surrender, triggered memories that Sam had spent years trying to suppress. Memories of other children caught in the crossfire of frontier violence, of decisions made in the heat of battle that had cost innocent lives. The boy stumbled and fell as he tried to back away from his tormentors, his knees striking the rocky ground hard enough that Sam could hear his cry of pain across the distance. The sound cut through Sam's hesitation like a knife through silk. Whatever consequences might follow, whatever dangers he might face, he could not ride away and leave a child to suffer at the hands of these men. Sam spurred his horse forward, breaking cover with the sudden decisiveness that had once made him an effective cavalry officer. His shout echoed across the canyon as he rode hard toward the confrontation, his revolver already in his hand. The three bandits spun toward this unexpected threat, their surprise evident even at a distance. The leader's scarred face twisted into a snarl as he raised his own weapon, clearly unprepared for interference in what should have been an isolated crime. The boy looked up with confusion and desperate hope as this stranger charged into the deadly situation, not understanding why a white man would risk his life for an Apache child. As Sam closed the distance between himself and the three armed outlaws, time seemed to slow with the peculiar clarity that accompanied moments of absolute commitment. He had made his choice, crossing a line that would forever change the trajectory of his carefully rebuilt life. There would be no turning back from whatever violence was about to unfold in this remote canyon. Chapter 2. Blood and Consequences. The first shots rang out before Sam reached effective range, the bandit's bullets kicking up clouds of dust around his charging horse. Years of cavalry training had taught him that momentum was everything in such encounters. Hesitation meant death, and retreat meant abandoning the child to whatever fate these men had planned. Sam pressed his horse harder, using the terrain's natural dips and rises to make himself a more difficult target while closing the distance that would bring his own weapon into play. The bandit leader's scarred face twisted with rage as he realized this lone rider had no intention of backing down. He barked orders to his companions, deploying them in a defensive formation that spoke to their own military or outlaw experience. These weren't random drifters or desperate farmers turned to crime. They moved with the practiced coordination of men who had fought together before and survived by their skill with weapons. Sam's first shot, Sam dismounted carefully, his weapon still ready, as he approached the wounded bandit. The man was young, maybe 25, with the desperate look of someone who had made too many bad choices and was finally facing the consequences. Blood seeped through his fingers where he clutched his shoulder, but the wound appeared survivable if properly treated. The bandit leader lay motionless among the rocks, his scarred face frozen in an expression of surprise that death had found him in this remote place. Sam knelt briefly to confirm what he already knew. The man was beyond help or harm. Whatever crimes had brought him to this canyon, whatever violence he had planned for the Apache child, his story had ended with the finality that characterized frontier justice. Only then did Sam turn his attention to the boy, who remained pressed against the canyon wall with eyes wide with shock and confusion. The child's clothing was torn from his desperate attempts to escape, and blood seeped from scrapes on his hands and knees. But he was alive, and that was what mattered most in this moment of reckoning among the red rocks of Arizona Territory. Chapter 3. The Boy's Secret. Sam approached the traumatized child with careful movements, understanding that sudden gestures might send the boy fleeing into the desert, where death from exposure would be just as certain as what the bandits had planned. The Apache boy watched Sam's every movement with intelligent dark eyes that held far too much wariness for someone so young. As Sam knelt beside the child to examine his injuries, he noticed details that made his breath catch in his throat. The boy's clothing, though torn and dusty from his ordeal, showed the intricate beadwork and distinctive patterns that marked him as someone of importance within Apache society. More telling still was the medicine bag that hung around his neck. Not the simple leather pouch of a common tribal member, but an elaborately decorated artifact that spoke of high status and spiritual significance. Sam's years of military service in Apache territory had taught him to read the subtle indicators of tribal hierarchy. The turquoise and silver work adorning the boy's clothing represented the finest artistry the Apache people could produce. Such finery was reserved for the children of chiefs, war leaders, and medicine men, individuals whose capture or death could provoke responses that would echo across the entire territory. The child's physical appearance reinforced Sam's growing suspicions. Despite his youth, the boy carried himself with an innate dignity that spoke of leadership training from birth. Even in his current state of fear and exhaustion, he maintained a composure that suggested he had been raised to face adversity with courage rather than panic. Sam carefully cleaned the boy's wounds with water from his canteen, noting how the child endured the painful process without complaint. As he worked, Sam caught glimpses of additional markings that confirmed his worst fears. Ritual scars that marked the boy as the son of a war chief, someone whose bloodline traced back to the great Apache leaders who had resisted American expansion for decades. The implications hit Sam like a physical blow. The three bandits had not simply been planning a random act of violence against a native child. They had been preparing to kill or capture someone whose death would be seen as an act of war by the Apache people. The boy's disappearance would bring searching parties, war bands, and ultimately the kind of retribution that could ignite conflicts across hundreds of square miles of territory. As Sam finished tending to the boy's wounds, he found himself studying the child's face and feeling an uncomfortable sense of familiarity. Something about the boy's features nagged at his memory, stirring recollections from his military service that he couldn't quite bring into focus. The feeling was strong enough to suggest that this encounter was not the random meeting it appeared to be. The wounded bandit, who had been watching this examination with growing alarm, seemed to understand the magnitude of what they had stumbled into. His face had gone pale with something beyond his physical injury. The realization that they had nearly triggered a war that would consume the entire territory in blood and violence. Chapter 4. An Unexpected Visitor. Sam spent the remainder of that day getting the wounded bandit to the nearest town jail and ensuring the boy received proper medical attention from the territorial doctor. The Apache child, who revealed his name, was Little Wolf, spoke fluent English, learned from mission schools, a detail that confirmed Sam's suspicions about his elevated status within the tribe. By evening, Sam had arranged for the boy to stay safely in town while word was sent to the Apache reservation about his rescue. What Sam didn't expect was to find a lone rider waiting at his ranch when he returned home the following sunset. The man sat motionless on a painted horse beside Sam's modest cabin, his bearing and dress marking him unmistakably as Apache nobility. Eagle feathers adorned his graying hair, and his weathered face bore the scars of countless battles fought across the southwestern territories. This was no ordinary tribal member, but a war chief of considerable standing. Sam approached with his hands visible, recognizing the delicate nature of this encounter. The Apache leader dismounted with fluid grace despite his apparent age, moving with the controlled power of a man accustomed to command. His dark eyes studied Sam with an intensity that seemed to penetrate straight through to his soul, evaluating not just his immediate intentions, but his fundamental character. The chief spoke in accented but precise English, introducing himself as Red Hawk, war leader of the Chiricahua band and father to the boy Sam had rescued. His words carried the formal weight of someone conducting official business between nations, acknowledging both the gravity of the situation and the debt that now existed between them. Red Hawk had ridden alone to Sam's ranch, a gesture that spoke of either tremendous trust or calculated courage. Red Hawk's next words struck Sam like lightning. The chief described in detail a winter patrol 7 years earlier, when a small band of Apache warriors had encountered a cavalry unit trapped by a blizzard in the Dragoon Mountains. The soldiers, including a young lieutenant named Sam Fletcher, had been dying of exposure when Apache scouts found them. Against tribal council advice, Red Hawk had ordered his warriors to share shelter and supplies with their traditional enemies. Sam's memories flooded back with stunning clarity. He remembered that brutal winter, the hopeless situation, and the Apache warriors who had appeared like guardian spirits when death seemed certain. One of those warriors had been a young boy, perhaps 5 years old, who had shared his meager rations with the starving soldiers. That child had been Little Wolf, and the war chief who had saved Sam's entire patrol had been Red Hawk himself. The circle of honor and debt had completed itself in ways that neither man could have foreseen. Sam's rescue of Little Wolf had not been a random act of courage, but the fulfillment of an obligation that stretched back 7 years. Red Hawk had saved Sam's life during the blizzard, and now Sam had returned the favor by protecting Red Hawk's son from the bandits. Red Hawk's revelation transformed everything Sam thought he understood about the previous day's events. This was not simply a case of a cowboy helping a stranger's child, but the completion of a cycle of honor that transcended racial boundaries and military conflicts. The debt between them was now balanced, but Red Hawk's presence suggested that something more significant was about to be proposed, something that would challenge Sam's understanding of loyalty, justice, and his place in the complex web of relationships that defined frontier life. Chapter 5. Debts of Honor. Red Hawk reached into his leather satchel and withdrew an object that made Sam's breath catch in his throat, a military insignia bearing Sam's name and unit designation from his cavalry service. The Apache chief explained how he had kept this memento from that winter rescue 7 years ago, when Sam had insisted on giving the starving Apache child his own military rations despite facing starvation himself. The gesture had been noted and remembered by every warrior present during that desperate time. The war chief's revelation went deeper than simple reciprocal kindness. During that winter encounter, Red Hawk had been leading his band away from a planned attack on a nearby settlement, choosing a path of avoidance rather than aggression. Sam's willingness to share food with Apache children had convinced Red Hawk that not all white soldiers were the same, that some possessed honor that transcended the brutal realities of frontier warfare. Red Hawk spoke of the intelligence he had gathered during his years of conflict with territorial forces. Intelligence that revealed Sam's unit had been specifically targeted by corrupt army officers who wanted to eliminate soldiers with inconvenient consciences. The blizzard that nearly killed Sam's patrol had been the result of orders that deliberately sent them into impossible terrain during dangerous weather. Red Hawk's rescue had thwarted what amounted to a murder plot disguised as military incompetence. More shocking still, Red Hawk revealed that the 3 bandits who had threatened Little Wolf were not random outlaws, but hired guns working for the same corrupt officials who had tried to eliminate Sam years earlier. The attack on Little Wolf had been designed to provoke Apache retaliation that would justify increased military action against the tribes. Sam's intervention had prevented not just the boy's death, but a carefully orchestrated plan to ignite a war that would serve private interests at the cost of countless innocent lives. Red Hawk's proposal was as unexpected as his revelations had been. The Apache people needed allies who understood both worlds. Individuals who could navigate the treacherous political landscape that threatened to destroy their people through systematic corruption and manufactured conflicts. Sam's actions, both past and present, had proven his character in ways that transcended cultural boundaries and military loyalties. The war chief offered Sam a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could return to his quiet existence as a ranch hand, content in knowing he had done the right thing in a moment of crisis. Or he could accept a role as a bridge between 2 worlds, working secretly to expose the corruption that threatened both Apache and settler communities while helping to forge a path toward genuine peace rather than profitable warfare. Chapter 6: A New Alliance. Sam stood in the gathering twilight, weighing Red Hawk's proposal against everything he had built since leaving military service. The quiet life he had constructed on the frontier represented safety and solitude, but it also meant turning away from a chance to address the systematic injustices that had shaped his experiences as a soldier. The corruption Red Hawk described explained so many of the senseless orders and tragic outcomes that had haunted Sam's military career. Red Hawk's network operated through carefully placed individuals who could move between Apache and settler communities without arousing suspicion. They gathered intelligence about corrupt officials, documented illegal land seizures, and worked to prevent manufactured conflicts that served private interests rather than genuine security needs. Sam's background as both a former cavalry officer and current ranch hand made him uniquely valuable to such an organization. The decision crystallized as Sam thought about Little Wolf and the countless other innocent people caught between competing forces they could neither understand nor control. His intervention in the canyon had been instinctive, but accepting Red Hawk's proposal would be a conscious choice to stand against the systems that created such desperate situations. The personal cost would be significant: constant danger, perpetual secrecy, and the knowledge that discovery would mean death. Sam extended his hand to Red Hawk, accepting the alliance that would transform him from an isolated ranch hand into an active agent for justice. The Apache chief's firm grip sealed more than an agreement between individuals. It forged a partnership between former enemies who had chosen cooperation over conflict. Their handshake represented hope that understanding could prevail over the hatred and manipulation that had defined frontier relations for too long. Red Hawk departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Sam alone with the weight of his new responsibilities. The corrupt officials who had orchestrated the attack on Little Wolf would discover that their plan had not only failed, but had created the very alliance they had sought to prevent. Sam's rescue of one Apache child had evolved into something far greater: a commitment to protecting all the innocent caught in the crossfire of a war fueled by greed rather than genuine grievances. As stars emerged in the desert sky, Sam Fletcher began planning his new life as a guardian between worlds, knowing that the boy he had saved from bandits had ultimately saved him from a meaningless existence. The true victory lay not in the gunfight at the canyon, but in the choice to transform personal courage into lasting change for both communities. If this story of courage and unexpected alliances captivated you, smash that like button, subscribe for more incredible true tales from the Old West, and drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Sam's boots. These forgotten heroes and their remarkable choices shaped the frontier we know today.